appreciate the opportunity to participate in this meeting. As Eric mentioned, I'm going to talk a little about melon herbicides. There's probably 30 or 40 grass and broadleaf herbicides that are common in this region, and every one of them can be a problem in melons. With the fall and spring melons, the long season that we grow them under, they can all at times be a problem. And we're dependent not just on herbicides, but on cultivation and hand labor as well to control them all. This slide shows development of herbicides for the various crops grown in this region over the last 50 years. And you can see that melons, there's very little been developed in recent years for melons. There's only one crop, leaf lettuce, that there's fewer herbicides available for. This is the year that most of them were developed, and with the exception of Halosulfuron or Sandia and Select, just about all of them are 25 to 30 years old. So most of our efforts have been not in developing new chemistry, but to figure out ways to make the old products work better. This slide shows the weed control that we've rated over the last several years with the herbicides that are available currently for melons in this region. It looks like, from this slide, like there's more available than there really is. The Cethoxidum or Post and Clethodim or Select, Arrow, Select Max. Those are just grass herbicides. They're very effective, but if we're dealing with one of the several broadleaf weeds we have, you have to take those out. Then we have ethafluralin or Curbit, used to be called Sonolan. We've never been able to use that safely in this region. We've seen a lot of injury from that product over the years. Anytime it gets anywhere near the seed, we get injury, so we haven't been able to use that safely. So this is what we end up with, really only 4 products for melons in this region that control all the weeds that we get. I want to just take the next few minutes to talk about how we might use these most effectively. I'm going to start with Dacthal. It's not a new product, as you all know. It's been around for more than 50 years. It was first developed in 1958 by Fermenta, belonged to ISK Biotech for several years until 1997, when manufacturing was briefly halted, and AMVAC acquired it in 2000. The only major change in it has been the change in formulation from the wettable powder to a flowable. They're both still available and both still used. The key with Dacthal is it's a pre-emergence herbicide, and it's absorbed by both the roots and the shoots, but most of the absorption is the shoots, not so much the roots. The hypocotyl on broadleaf weeds where the shoots coming out of seed, and the coleoptile on the grass. It's important that we have the herbicide right there when the weed germinates. And contrary to what many people think, oftentimes you will get emergence of of weeds with Dacthal. They'll start to come out. They'll start to emerge from the soil, absorb the herbicide, and then slowly die. So if you do see some weeds emerge, it doesn't mean that you're not going to control them. A key to this and many other soil-applied herbicides is how strongly it adheres to the soil. It is a key to how we can use them most effectively. You can see next to Balan and Treflan, 2 dinitroanilins that are held very tightly to the soil. Dacthal is next, very tightly held to the soil as compared to something like Eptam. This is a coefficient of absorption, they call it. It's just a measure. They put the herbicide in the solution, and they just measure what comes out the bottom. So it takes a lot of water to incorporate Dacthal. Not only does it help incorporate the herbicide into the soil, but it also helps compete for binding sites on the soil with the herbicide. You want some of the herbicide in solution. You don't want it all bound tightly to the soil. You don't want a herbicide that's very mobile or you'll leach it, but you want one that has some in solution. If you put dactyl on very dry soil, oftentimes it'll bind to that soil and it won't be available for weed control. Having said that, we incorporate dactyl both with sprinklers and with furrow irrigation. Sometimes it's chemicated and can be used effectively both ways. This was a field up in Blythe a few years ago where the same rate of dactyl was put on at the same time. The field on the left, it was incorporated with furrow irrigation where the beds were blackened and the moisture was held there. There was good moisture on top of the bed. There was a band put in both cases right down the middle of the bed. You can see how much better it worked where it was furrow incorporated as opposed to sprinkler incorporated. In this case, we know that light, frequent irrigations with sprinklers doesn't incorporate dactyl very well. We've always told people the more water you can put on it, the better it's going to work. In this case, it's just the opposite. We think that they put on too much water and leached the herbicide below the germinating weeds. My gut feeling is, and just when you think you have these things figured out, something like this happens, because I've always told people put on as much water as you can. My gut feeling is that when you spray a band on and incorporate it with furrow irrigation, that you get a little more uniform and consistent results than you do with sprinklers, where it's a little more dicey, putting on too much or too little water. But it can work effectively both ways. You can't see, this isn't a very good slide, but if you could see better, you could see this was dactyl put on down below here. This was prior to transplanting, and it worked very well, but it stunted the melons. You cannot use dactyl or treplant prior to the plant being well established, or you'll get unacceptable stunting of the plant. So you can only use dactyl and treplant as a lay-by treatment on established melons. Let me move to Prefar, another old product. Was registered first in the 60s. First by Stauffer, then ICI or Zeneca had it for a while, and Gowan has had it since about the mid-1990s.